Like all the great cities of the world, Rome is many things to many people. To me, it's our history. It's almost 2,800 years of Western quote-unquote civilization. Rome is, along with ancient Greece, Western civilization as we know it. The good, the bad, and the ugly, for all you spaghetti Western fans. I remember the first time I saw Alfred Hitchcock's The Third Man. Orson Welles' character says something that made me rewind the tape like 4 times. In Italy, for 30 years under the Borgias, they had warfare, terror, murder, and bloodshed. But they produced Michelangelo, Leonardo da Vinci, and the Renaissance. In Switzerland, they had brotherly love. They had 500 years of democracy and peace. And what did that produce? The cuckoo clock. That's hilarious. Now, it's not fair, and I can tell you which I would have rather lived through. Give me the Swiss Miss life any day. Democracy over tyranny all day. But something about it resonates. I think it's the interplay of the two that's more interesting. The striving for one while surviving the other. That makes our history so fascinating. Like I said before, Rome is many things to many people. It's family, it's food, it's fashion, it's cars and luxury brands, it's the glamour and the nightlife. But since I started off quoting a film, let's go back to film for just a second, and let's use another rough 30 years. In the 30 years following the devastation of World War II, Italy gave film the genres of neorealism, the new wave, travelogue, sword and sandal, and spaghetti western. That's amazing. And most of them came out of one little studio in Rome. But as I said earlier, to me, Rome is mainly about the history. It's about looking into the past and being able to feel it and see it in everything that we feel and see today. It's still with us. I have friends who love Rome and would spend their entire time in Rome pursuing any one of those themes I mentioned earlier. The family, the food, the fashion, the luxury brands, the nightlife, the movie angle. We, on the other hand, spent 3 full days with a PhD in archaeology. And to me, anyway, that was much more interesting. History isn't neat. It's not formulaic. The good guy doesn't always win, and the lessons aren't always the right ones. But that's one reason I always found it so interesting. It's messy. It's complicated. Rome is a perfect place to see that. In ancient Rome, you had the Roman Empire preceded by the Roman Republic. We like to focus on the Republic of Rome and its democratic roots. SPQR, the Senate and people of Rome and all that. But virtually nothing we see today that's remained, the monuments, the edifices, the structure, virtually none of that is republic. It's empire. There are a lot of reasons for it, but a big one was that the senators of Rome during the Republic period didn't want any senator to have funds to build anything terribly grand or permanent, for fear of granting him a legacy and immortality, and thus power. So everything was built not with stone, but with wood, intentionally not to last, nothing too permanent. The emperors were entirely different. They were all about making it grand and permanent, and building a legacy, impressing anyone who would see it forevermore. And we do still see them today. Interestingly, partially because of another dictator, Mussolini. All across Italy, I think we were surprised to constantly hear Mussolini's name, and not just in derisive memory either. Again, history is complicated. Earlier in Venice, we'd heard about the causeway that leads out to the islands being constructed by Mussolini. And several of the highways we'd taken were holdovers from his regime. And now that we were in Rome itself, his stamp was still everywhere. Many of the excavations of Roman ruins were undertaken by him. The Roman Forum excavation was a project of Mussolini's. Ostia, an archaeological site outside of Rome, was a project of Mussolini's. But I think it's important to point out that his fascination with the Roman past had little to do with preserving history and more to do with trying to revive an empire and associate himself and his regime with past glory and legitimacy. Regardless, today we have the benefits nonetheless. As I said, history isn't neat and tidy. I'll stop boring you to death for a second to admit that while we did spend our time going from site to site and seeing all these treasures of Western civilization, we, as we are prone to do, kept most of our conversations on the complete opposite end of the spectrum. As we were here overlooking the Forum from Belvedere Terrace, I was laughing because our guide kept talking about the 80s. It would come up from time to time, and I was thrown off each time because this is the difference between an Italian and an American. When they talk about the 80s, they may really be talking about the 80s. And to an American, I hear the 80s, and I, of course, think the 1980s. He's talking about the reign of Emperor Domitian, but I'm thinking, yes, the reign of Duran Duran. You may have given the world the Colosseum, but we gave it synth pop. Oh, and sorry, speaking of pop, we were constantly looking at each other and wondering what the hell is going on with these knockoff generic covers of pop songs you would hear everywhere in Europe. When did this become a thing? In restaurants, in taxis, in lobbies, in shopping centers, everywhere we went, we heard this really bad generic knockoff pop music. Why? Why not just play the radio? Regular radio. Why does it have to be a generic cover? Is it some EU regulation? I can't tell you how many we heard, but it was almost every time there was music, it was generic. I swear I heard BB Rexa and SZA in Muzak form. Why? Just play the radio. If you're a taxi driver and you want pop music, why not play a regular radio station? Why does it have to be generic? It was bizarre, and it was everywhere. Fortunately, the food was better than the music. We were really lucky to have recommendations from friends and the guides, which made almost every meal really enjoyable. We had drinks at a bar that's a favorite of my friend John, and where George has his West Point pennant hanging somewhere. And Paolo took really good care of us, which was a tremendous benefit. Look at the lines at the Vatican. And just like in Venice and Florence, having a good guide meant we walked right past all of it and straight into the exhibits. I'd never been to the Vatican before and had honestly never had any interest in going. But on this trip we did go, and I'm glad we did. They have an amazing collection of art, and that was why we wanted to go. The sculptures alone are worth the trip. And I've said before, I'm not really all that impressed by the paintings from this age. They're good, obviously, but I've always been way more impressed by the sculptures. And the Vatican has an amazing collection of sculptures. Forgetting completely the religious significance and focusing entirely on the history and art, it's possible to actually enjoy the Vatican. Paolo told us this fascinating story about this statue of Asclepius. I had no idea who he was, but the story was really interesting. See that staff with the snake around it? There's one snake. That's the staff of Asclepius. On the left, you can see that symbol. It's a medical symbol. You see it everywhere. But see the symbol on the right with the two snakes intertwined? That is also a symbol you see everywhere for the medical industry, but it's not a medical symbol. It's caduceus, which is from Hermes. And it's a commercial symbol. It signifies commerce. And people didn't understand that when they started misusing the symbol for medical industry and medical personnel. It actually irritates a lot of people in the medical industry now when they learn it and find out that they're using the wrong symbol. And it's kind of ironic that it symbolizes making lots of money, not helping people. Okay, I'm going to warn you in advance for some really bad video. Get ready. We went into the Sistine Chapel, and you're not supposed to take videos or photos in the Sistine Chapel. And I wanted to take video and photos of the ceiling. So I did. Illegally or surreptitiously or however you want to classify it. People think you're not allowed to take photos in there because of the flashes. That's not actually true. That's not why. You were allowed to take photos in the Sistine Chapel up until around 1980 when they needed to do a restoration. And they sent out for bids and for help on the restoration, and Nippon Television of Japan was the highest bidder. They stepped up with the most money. And part of the deal with Japanese television was nobody would be allowed to take photos and videos of the restored artwork. They wanted an exclusive, and they got it. But that deal with Japanese television has actually long since expired. It hasn't been in place for about 20 years. Yet the rule still exists. Although they are pretty lax about it now. I mean, they're not that strict about it, but technically you're not supposed to take video and photos, but I wanted to get video and photo of the ceiling, so I took it anyway. I know you're not supposed to, but if the Vatican says you can't do something, sorry, I'm going to do it. It was kind of creepy going to the Vatican, but there's no denying the historical significance in addition to the art. So much history has passed through there, and it's still visible for us to just look at today. This spot here is where Charlemagne was crowned Holy Roman Emperor in 800 AD. Just a nondescript spot on the floor. It's so old, it reminded me of the first time I went to Westminster Abbey, although they're nothing alike. When I was young, I went to Westminster Abbey and I noticed stairs carved out of stone, which were worn smooth and dipped in the middle. You see that all over the place now. But I was fascinated by it when I was young. How old those stairs are, how hard that stone is, how many feet had to have crossed those thresholds to wear the stone smooth. That was fascinating to me as a young person, and today I still love to see it. And St. Peter's reminded me of that because it's just so old. I said earlier that Rome is one of the best places on earth to see and feel our history. And I mean that not just in the big monuments and famous landmarks, but in the little things that most people don't even pay attention to. My personal favorite example are the fountains. There are fountains all over Rome. Big famous ones like Trevi and the Barcaccia at the Spanish Steps, and small little ones so small you wouldn't even notice them. Just big enough to get a drink and wash your hands. And a secret is that you can generally tell which are served by modern sources and which are served by ancient aqueducts that have served Rome for 2,000 years. If the fountain is always running, it's served by an ancient aqueduct. And if you turn it on and off, it's a modern source. Those ancient aqueducts have been running and serving the people of Rome for 2,000 years, and they still run today. And you can get a drink or wash your hands today in the pure waters of an aqueduct built by Romans 2,000 years ago. Walking around Rome, I have this silly little compulsion. I feel compelled to take a little drink or at least put my hand in the fountain when I see them. There are 5 or 6 ancient aqueducts still serving Rome. Aqua Claudia may be the longest and Marcia the oldest, but personally, I'm partial to Aqua Virgo. I'm a Virgo. And that one aqueduct serves a lot of little drinking fountains, but also the fountains of Piazza Navona, Trevi Fountain, and the Barcaccia at Spanish Steps, some of the most famous fountains in Rome. It was built in 19 BC and it still runs today, and the water tastes great. That's a rare opportunity to feel 2,000 years of history.